So now we can move to a couple of signings that the Giants made, and both of them pretty big in their own way. So let's start out with Cole Beasley. The Giants signed him to a one-year deal per Mike Garafolo. We know what this is. It's another former Buffalo Bill, friend of the Giants coaching staff, but more friend of Brian Daboll, head coach of the New York Giants, that heads his way to New York, the New York Bills, as fans like to attribute to the Giants now. Beasley flirted with the Giants on multiple occasions last year. He actually almost signed with them during last season. He's 34 years old. He actually signed with the Dallas Cowboys as an undrafted rookie free agent out of SMU in 2012. And after some 7 seasons in Arlington, joined the Bills in 2019, spent 3 seasons there before splitting time between Buffalo and Tampa Bay last season. In 153 career games, 51 of them he started. Beasley had hauled in 556 receptions for 5,744 yards, also had 34 touchdowns in that time period, added 7 yards on the ground, 19 yards on kick returns, and 220 yards as a punt returner, earned a 62.2 PFF grade in 2022, and his career best PFF grade, which is an 87.2, came in the year 2016. So Cole Beasley adds his name to an already stacked wide receiver room, but more an already stacked slot wide receiver room. And that's something that Alex and I will get into. I don't know which one of us wants to read it, but the list of names goes on and on. And I'll have to give you, Alex, I'll go to you first so you can give your thoughts on this now even bigger wide receiver depth room that makes the 53-man roster even harder to think about. But what I can say is, I'll find the names. Let me go to you first.
Yeah, what I would say is this is now making a 15 deep wide receiver room. 1/6 of the whole roster is wide receivers at this current moment in time. Obviously, it won't finish that way. But Cole Beasley, I don't see him making the roster from initial points of view. He doesn't really fit the mold of what the Giants were trying to do this offseason. You could kind of see, especially in the wide receiver room, with who they brought in at what spots. They're kind of looking for athleticism. They're looking for separation, which I think Cole Beasley still has, but at a declining rate, obviously, at 34 years of age. So I see this more as a camp body type player, a locker room guy who can kind of mentor some of the younger receivers here. I don't really see a long-term, obviously not a long-term future, or even really much of a short-term future past training camp for Cole Beasley. Maybe he sticks around on the practice squad or something like that. He's a nice guy to have around in the building. But I don't really see where his production is going to lie on this Giants wide receiver, in this Giants wide receiver room in 2023. Maybe if it's 2020, we're talking a different story. But right now, Cole Beasley obviously was highly successful in Buffalo, but you saw when he was with Tampa Bay a little bit last year, he definitely, lost some of his legs. That's for sure. He's definitely on the decline, as you'd expect any 34-year-old wide receiver to be. But like I said, I think it's nice to have him in for camp, and hopefully he can mentor some of the, younger, more the less experienced wide receivers.
Yeah, Alex, I mean, we were already, before Beasley even signed, having trouble with the 53-man roster. Do we do 6 wide receivers? Do we do 7? Because we just have so many. So with Beasley's name now first, the Giants also have in their room Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder, Jeff Smith, Colin Johnson, David Sills, Bryce Ford Wheaton, Jaden Mickens, Mekhi Polk, and Khalil Pimpleton. And that is the room.
It's about 15, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. A lot of those guys, right? I'm just thinking off the top of my head, slot guys. Obviously, you're talking a little bit of flexibility as well. I mean, Cole Beasley is purely a slot guy, but, we've seen Shep play on the inside and outside. Wan'Dale's been flexible in the past. Who else did you name? Jamison Crowder's played on the outside a little bit in his career as well. A lot of these very small body wide receivers, though. That's the big theme here. You got a couple of bigger bodies in Colin Johnson and Darius Slayton, who I guess you can consider a bigger body. Bryce Ford Wheaton, who you brought in, but definitely a lot of small slot guys who, don't have that diverse skill set that the Giants are kind of really looking for in a bigger wide receiver. So that's something to keep in mind for sure.
And now we go to the other signing the New York Giants made, which was bringing in a running back during this period where Saquon Barkley is going on. different outlets and voicing his opinions on maybe he'll sit out, maybe he won't. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, the Giants have made a starting replacement if needed. I'll say that. They signed veteran running back James Robinson, played with the Jaguars and the Jets last season. Robinson played in 39 games with 32 starts across 3 seasons with the Jaguars and the Jets. The 24-year-old career totals include 2,262 yards on 514 rushing attempts. It's about 4 yards per rush, 18 touchdowns in that time span. Additional 91 receiving yards or 91 receptions for 617 yards and 5 scores, receiving scores, that is. Robinson had his greatest success as an undrafted free agent. I'm sure all fantasy football owners, or you can say, remember that year when he was an undrafted free agent in 2020. He was a very good pickup on that waiver wire as he finished the year with 1,070 total rushing yards, 10 total touchdowns in his debut season with the Jaguars. You can say it's been a steady decline since then. I just don't think he's had the same amount of opportunity. Hasn't had the same
Achilles,
spark.
really.
People didn't know how to play against him. They didn't know how to cover him. They didn't really know who he was. And now he's here, and now he's also injuries as well as kept him out. And now he's with the New York Giants as maybe a replacement if Saquon Barkley decides to sit out.
Like I kind of mentioned a second ago, like the torn Achilles is a terrible, terrible injury. Probably harder to come back from for a running back than a torn ACL, and we know how bad torn ACLs are for running backs. But torn Achilles, we've seen how bad that's been. Just not a football player, but Kevin Durant tore his Achilles. Right, it took him almost 2 years to come back to the NBA, and he's a fantastic athlete. Imagine being a running back where you're really pressing off that Achilles constantly to get that drive going forward. So it's going to be tough for him. Obviously, he's a year past it now, but maybe he looks a little bit better this season than he did last season, because I remember he got traded to the Jets. He wildly underperformed expectations, I should say, for the Jets. Then he went to the Patriots for training camp or for OTAs this year. He got cut. So definitely not a player who's on the up right now, but maybe he finds his footing in training camp for the Giants. Maybe he can dig himself out a roster spot. There we go. I was trying to say something smart, turned into not something very smart. But yeah, I think if he could he possibly make the roster? Maybe. I give it a 50-50 chance as of right now. He'd have to beat out guys like Gary Brightwell, who do give special teams flexibility. James Robinson doesn't do so. Obviously, the new rookie, Eric Gray, who I don't think is not going to make the roster. You got Matt Burrito, who was pretty productive last year, and then obviously Saquon Barkley. But if Saquon Barkley sits out the start of the season, then I could see a role for James Robinson. But again, a nice person to have in camp, another body here, especially considering Saquon Barkley will not be playing during training camp, or not participating at least.